My ex accused me of being a father after 5 years of no contact. But when my own sister organized protests outside my job with defamatory signs, I sued them both, and my sister had to pay me $12,000. I'm 29 years old, I work in digital marketing for a medium-sized company, and I need to tell this story because I literally almost lost my job, my reputation, and my sanity over a lie that wasn't even mine. What happened about a year and a half ago basically destroyed the relationship with my sister and made me see my family in a completely different way. And there are still days when I can't believe all of this actually happened. I guess I should start at the beginning. I mean, with Crystal. We dated for like a year and a half when I was 22, 23 years old, something like that. She was my age. We met at a friend's party, and at first everything was fine, normal. But the relationship was never super serious. Like, we didn't live together or anything like that, and honestly, we had more fights than good moments. The thing is, we broke up in a kind of chaotic way, with yelling and drama, and after that, we just never spoke again. I blocked her number, she blocked mine, and we moved on with our lives. 5 years went by, 5 complete years without a single word between us. Not a message, nothing. I literally didn't know anything about her life, where she lived, what she was doing, nothing at all. And then, one random day, about a year and a half ago, I get a Facebook message from her. At first, I thought it was spam or something, because I didn't even remember I still had her added on social media, but no, it was her, with her profile picture and everything. The message said something like, "Hi, Zachary. I know we haven't talked in a long time, but I need to talk to you urgently about something important. Can we meet?" And I was like, what the hell? Because after 5 years of absolute silence, now she wants to talk? My first instinct was to ignore her completely, but curiosity got the better of me, I guess. And I replied, telling her to tell me by message what it was about before agreeing to anything. What happened next was basically like a bomb. Crystal responds that she has a 5-year-old son, that the boy is mine, and that she needs me to start paying child support because she's struggling financially. When I tell you, I froze. I froze. I read the message like 10 times, trying to process what I was reading. A 5-year-old son? Mine? The math didn't even add up quite right because we had broken up 5 years ago. I mean, if the kid was 5 years old, it meant she would have gotten pregnant right when we broke up, or even after. And during all that time, for 5 complete years, she had never, not once, contacted me to tell me anything about a pregnancy or a child or anything. How is that supposed to make sense? I responded immediately that I needed proof, that I needed a paternity test before even considering anything. She got super defensive instantly and started with excuses, that the kid was identical to me, that she was 100% sure, that I was the only one she had been with during that time, which, by the way, I knew wasn't true, because we had broken up precisely because I found out she was cheating on me, but whatever. I told her I didn't care what she said, that without a DNA test I wasn't going to accept anything or give a single dollar. She got angry. Told me I was being irresponsible and that I was abandoning my son, and I told her I first needed to know if it was my son before talking about responsibilities. Like 2 weeks went by of her constantly sending me messages, pictures of the kid, who was named Gavin, according to her, telling me to look at how much he looked like me, that I was a monster for denying my son, all that crap. And every time I responded the same thing, paternity test or no conversation. Finally, she agreed, but with a bunch of weird conditions, that I had to pay for the test, that it had to be at a specific clinic she chose. I don't know what else. I agreed to pay for the test because honestly I just wanted this resolved once and for all, but I insisted it be at a certified and recognized laboratory, not just any place, she said. We coordinated the appointment. The 3 of us went, her, the kid, and me, to a private laboratory here in the city, and they did the test. It was awkward as hell. The kid was crying. Crystal was glaring at me every 2 seconds, and I just wanted it to be over quickly. They told us the results would take like a week, and during that week, Crystal wouldn't stop sending me messages asking if I was ready to accept my responsibility, to start thinking about how much I was going to give her monthly, that the kid needed a father, all that stuff. I didn't answer anything because I was waiting for the results, and there was no point arguing before having them. When the results came, I opened them at home, alone, and honestly, I felt like a huge weight was lifted off me. The test was clear, unequivocal, without any possible doubt, probability of paternity 0%. I was not the father of that child. I immediately sent Crystal a picture of the results and wrote something like, "Here are your results. I'm not the father. Don't ever contact me again." She responded with a bunch of furious messages saying the laboratory had made a mistake, that this was impossible, that she knew I was the father, and I simply blocked her on everything. Facebook, WhatsApp, phone, everything. I thought that's where it all ended, that I could now move on with my life peacefully. How wrong I was. Like 2 weeks later, I was at my parents' house for a Sunday family meal. We were there, my dad, Brian, my mom, Betty, my sister Lindsay, and my brother Marcus. Everything was going normal. Eating. Talking about nonsense, when suddenly Lindsay looks at me and says, "Is it true you have a son and don't want to take responsibility?" I was left with my fork in the air, like, what? I asked her what the hell she was talking about, and she tells me that Crystal contacted her, that she told her the whole story, and that she couldn't believe I was miserable enough to deny support to my own son. I exploded. I explained to everyone that Crystal had contacted me after 5 years, saying she had a son of mine, that I demanded a paternity test, and that the results showed I was not the father. Lindsay didn't believe me. She literally told me I had probably falsified the results, that laboratories could be bribed, that Crystal had no reason to lie about something like that. I was hallucinating. I mean, my own sister was calling me a liar and defending my toxic ex I hadn't seen in 5 years. I showed her the laboratory results on my phone, official document and everything, and she just said that didn't prove anything, that I was an oppressor, and that I was using my male privilege to escape my responsibilities. My dad interrupted her and told her to stop saying stupid things, that if the DNA test said I wasn't the father, then I wasn't the father, period. Marcus also defended me and told Lindsay she was being ridiculous. My mom tried to calm the situation, saying we all needed to breathe and talk calmly, but Lindsay got up from the table yelling that the family was defending an irresponsible father and left slamming the door. I thought Lindsay would eventually come to her senses, that she'd realize she was being irrational. But no. Things got worse. Much worse. Like a week after that family disaster, I was working normally at the office. It was a Tuesday afternoon, I think, when my boss calls me to his office. I go in and he's there with a really unhappy face and asks me if I know why there are 2 women outside the building with a giant sign that says, "Zachary is an irresponsible father," with my full name and everything. I felt like I died right there. We went down together and sure enough, there were Crystal and Lindsay, my sister, with a huge sign, yelling at people passing by that I was a deadbeat dad, that I abandoned my son, that I was worthless. I ran out toward them and yelled at them to leave. What the hell were they doing? And Crystal started yelling at me in front of everyone that I should give her money for her son, that I was a monster, that she was going to sue me. Lindsay joined in yelling that I was a disgrace, that everyone deserved to know what kind of person I was. My coworkers were watching everything from the windows. People on the street were stopping to look. It was humiliating on a level I can't even describe. My boss pulled me inside and told me he couldn't allow that kind of circus outside the office, that if that happened again, he'd have to consider my position at the company. I explained the whole situation to him, showed him the paternity test, and he told me he understood my situation, but he still couldn't have that kind of drama affecting the business. That same night, I hired a lawyer, Andrea Coleman, who cost me like $3,000 just for the initial consultation and drafting some letters. She sent cease and desist letters to both Crystal and Lindsay, explaining that there was proof I wasn't the father, that the harassment had to stop immediately, and that otherwise we would take legal action for harassment and defamation. I thought that would scare them and they'd stop, but it basically made them angrier. Crystal started a social media campaign, created a Facebook group called something like Mothers Fighting Against Irresponsible Fathers, and posted my full name, my photo, my workplace, everything, saying I refused to support my son. Lindsay shared all the posts, added her own stories about how I was a terrible brother, and together, they managed to get like 200 people to see all that. I started receiving hate messages from people I didn't even know, calling me scum, telling me to die, vague threats. A woman I didn't even know who she was sent me like 50 messages, saying she hoped something horrible would happen to me. My social media became hell. I had to make them all private and even considered deleting them completely. At work, things also got tense. Some coworkers looked at me weird. There were rumors, and I felt like I had to go around explaining to everyone that I had not abandoned any child, because that child wasn't even mine. The worst moment was when Crystal and Lindsay organized a kind of protest outside my office on a Friday. They showed up with like 15 people. I don't know where they got them from, with signs and chanting slogans. My boss called me to his office again and basically gave me an ultimatum. Either I solved this situation immediately, or he was going to have to let me go because he couldn't risk the company's reputation. I was desperate, stressed to the max, sleeping like 3 hours a night, and feeling completely powerless because no matter how much I showed the DNA evidence, these two women just wouldn't stop. I went back to my lawyer, Andrea, and told her I needed to do something more aggressive, that this was already ruining my life. She told me we could proceed with a formal lawsuit for harassment, defamation, and emotional damages against both. I told her to go ahead, to do whatever she had to do. We filed the lawsuit, including all the evidence, screenshots of the social media posts, photos of the protests, testimonies from my coworkers, the threatening messages, everything. We also included the paternity test as evidence that all the accusations were false and malicious. When Crystal received notification of the lawsuit, she contacted me by email because I already had her blocked on everything else, begging me to withdraw the lawsuit, that she didn't have money for a lawyer, that she was very sorry. I responded through my lawyer that if she wanted me to withdraw the lawsuit, she had to sign an agreement where she publicly admitted I was not the father, delete all social media posts, pay compensation for damages, and never contact me again. She agreed pretty quickly. We signed an out-of-court agreement where she would pay me $8,000 total in installments because, obviously, she didn't have the money, delete all posts, and make a public statement retracting. She complied with deleting the posts and the statement, although obviously very few people saw the retraction compared to all the people who saw the original accusations. With Lindsay, it was different because she didn't accept any agreement at first. She said she had the right to freedom of speech, that she really believed I was the father, and she had the right to say it. All that crap. We had to go to a conciliation hearing that was basically a disaster, her yelling that I was using the patriarchal system to silence her, me trying to stay calm while my lawyer presented evidence after evidence of systematic harassment. The mediator was pretty direct with her, told her that freedom of speech didn't cover malicious defamation based on demonstrably false facts, and that if we didn't reach an agreement, we'd go to trial where she would very likely lose and have to pay much more. Lindsay broke down at that meeting, started crying, saying she was only trying to help Crystal because Crystal had told her I was the father, that she trusted her friend, that she never thought Crystal was lying to her. My dad, who went with me to the hearing to support me, told her that wasn't an excuse, that she had decided to believe a stranger before her own brother, that she had seen the DNA evidence and ignored it, and that she had to take responsibility for her actions. In the end, Lindsay accepted an agreement where she had to pay me $12,000 in damages. My lawyer originally asked for $20,000, but we agreed on less to close the case faster, make a public apology, and not contact me for at least 2 years unless I initiated contact. The money ended up being paid partly by her and partly by my mom, because Lindsay obviously didn't have $12,000 saved up. My dad got furious when he found out my mom had helped her pay, told my mom she was rewarding Lindsay's bad behavior, and there were strong fights between them about that. My dad also threatened to stop helping Lindsay financially. He paid for her car insurance and some other things, if she didn't apologize properly and acknowledge what she had done. Lindsay eventually apologized to me, but it was one of those kind of cold apologies like, "I'm sorry if I offended you," that you can tell doesn't come from the heart. I guess that's the best I'm going to get. Things in my family were weird after all this. My relationship with Lindsay is basically dead. We don't talk at all, not at family gatherings or anything. When there are family events, I arrive, greet my parents and Marcus, completely ignore Lindsay, eat, and leave. It's awkward, but it is what it is. My mom constantly tries to get us to reconcile, says we're family and we should forgive each other, but I've made it clear to her that Lindsay didn't just make a mistake. She actively tried to destroy my life and reputation based on someone else's lies, and that's not something I can forgive easily or quickly. My dad understands me. He's told me privately that in my place he wouldn't forgive her either, and that Lindsay has to live with the consequences of her decisions. At work, things eventually calmed down, but I had to have awkward conversations with several coworkers explaining the situation. And I know some probably still think something weird happened there. My boss was understanding in the end, especially when I showed him all the legal documentation proving the accusations were false. But the work relationship was definitely affected in some way, like I lost some trust or credibility. I don't know how to explain it. I never heard from Crystal again after the agreement. I hope she found the real father of her son and she's doing well. I mean, the kid isn't to blame for any of this. But honestly, I don't care. She almost destroyed my life for money, basically. Because that's what it was in the end. A desperate way to get money by making up that I was her son's father. What pisses me off the most about all this, looking back, is that my own sister betrayed me that way. That she chose to believe the story of a woman she hadn't seen in years before believing her own brother. That even after seeing the DNA test, she continued with her harassment campaign. That's something I don't know if I'll ever be able to process completely, you know? Marcus told me recently that he doesn't understand what went through Lindsay's head either. That maybe she was going through something personal and projected everything onto this situation. Who knows? Last week, my mom called to tell me Lindsay finally finished paying me the money. She was still owed like $2,000 that my mom lent her, and asked me if I'd now be willing to talk to her. I told her maybe someday, but not now, that I'm still processing everything. And it's true, I guess. There are still days when I think about everything that happened and it makes me angry, frustrated, makes me question a lot of things about family and loyalty and all that. But well, I keep moving forward. What else can I do?